Bonsoir guys, hope everybody's well and you've been following along with the videos. I've been inundated by a question. So somebody's asked, okay Brendan, we've watched some of your videos, we like what we're seeing, the racing looks cool, how do I get involved? I've gone and ordered a Mini, now what? Well, hopefully in this video I'll try to explain some of the bits and bobs and essentials you want to take with you for your first race. These are all options. There are always going to be different opinions of what you need and what you don't need, but just to get you up and running for your first 2 or 3 months at a track, here's kind of what you need. So as I say, you've been watching the channel, you're enjoying the Mini racing and you think, I want a slice of that, so you've gone out and got yourself a Mini. I'm going to talk you through my son's car. Let's go through the basics of what you need. So obviously you need your car. I've selected and gone with the Mardave brand. Obviously there's Kamtec as well. Now it's very much dealer's choice here. There's features of the Kamtec Mini that I really like. There's features of the Mardave that I really like, and I've stuck with Mardave as brand. Your basic setup, you need a shell. Doesn't need to be pretty, doesn't need to be well maintained. Just a shell with what I suggest is one colour paint and happy days. Depending where you're racing, there will be specific rules that you need to adhere to. So for example, you may have to have a specific motor, you may have to have specific gearing ratios, you may or may not need a specific bumper. Some clubs, although it's very rare that I think that comes across now, have what are called control tyres, so you have to run a specific brand of tyre. So one of the first things to do is just attend a club. Go and have a look, speak to the guys, have a look at the cars they're running, take some advice, go and spend a half an hour, 40 minutes, go to your local club and just check the rules, because there's no point turning up with a car that you can't run. Other than that, let's make the assumption now that you've got your car and it's a good basic setup. Your car's adhering to all the rules of the club, so we're ready to go racing. So we've turned up on race night, we've got our car, happy days. What else do we need? Clearly we're also going to need a transmitter. So just an electronics one to get started with. It's fine, it's not the most advanced. I've seen people really progress with these, and you know, category B drivers or people that are qualifying in the Bs are using these because you get familiar with what you're using, you get comfortable, you get confident with what it is. And to be perfectly honest, speaking from experience, I have a more advanced radio and it's nice to have the options to change different things, but to be perfectly honest, I'd say 70% of the options I'm not 100% sure what they all are. So nice and basic to start with. You don't need anything more advanced than this, and just crack on with that. So we've got our radio gear, we've got our car. Most clubs now run a transponder like this. This is an MRT transponder. I think some other brands are available, but I would say 80 to 90% of all racers will run this particular transponder. I think they retail about £60 delivered to your house. See if you can pick one up second hand for £40. They are pretty reliable, and the purpose of the transponder is it mounts inside the front of your car, and that every time you go over the line there's a piece of wire underneath the carpet or on a gantry over the track, and you'll hear a beep when you go over the line, and that will record your lap times and your position on track. So that's how we get our lap times and how you know whether or not you're in last place or first place. So that, I'm afraid, is possibly one of the more expensive parts of this game, but once you've bought it, I've had the same one now running for pretty much 3 years. It's never skipped a beat, so I think you're unlucky if you get a dud one. So you've got your radio gear, your car, transponder. Next, to complete our little ensemble of stuff we need is a couple of batteries. So across an average race night, I would say across 4, maybe 5 heats of racing, 2 batteries is fine. It's more than adequate for what you need. You will see lads turn up at the track and they will have a box full of about 10 different battery packs. Don't worry too much about that. You're only getting started. It's your first sort of month, 2 months racing. You just need a couple of batteries. I recommend these. They're reliable, they're dead straightforward to use, they plug into all the cars dead well, and yeah, I would say two batteries is more than enough really for a race night. As you progress and get better, you might want to change with the style of how the batteries are mounted to something called saddle packs, but to be honest, just don't crash and you'll do as well as everybody else. Right, so we've got batteries now. So the part of the car that you'll probably go through the most is tyres, because you will, when you first start, you will be crashing a lot, and you get something which is called chunking. So this is a perfectly decent set of tyres, and you will take big chunks, hence the name, out of the tyres. So they will become, rather than rotating round nice and smoothly, the tyre will bobble as it races along, and it will affect the handling of the car. So you will find yourself needing, I'd say, something's gone wrong with the car, have a couple of sets of front tyres and a couple of sets of rear tyres. That way you've got the option to replace a couple of sets if your car's not going too well, and if you're doing some crashing and they break. For the sake of £5 or £6 for a set of tyres, you don't want your race night to end for the sake of not having some tyres with you. And I think having a selection of different tyres is a nice to have. I have a decent selection of tyres. I tend on a race night not to use them. Possibly that's why I'm not quite as good as some of the faster lads. But certainly if when I'm racing one of the bigger events, a full day event, having tyres to be able to rotate through the car is definitely something that really helps. I usually use contact tyres, and they'll come in a box like this. I take them out, and so you've got different tyres. Definitely have a couple of sets of tyres with you. I completely recommend that, having some tyres. Moreover, still with the front end of the car, if your club allows what we call tyre additive, or sauce as it's referred to, in that your car will be infinitely better if you use tyre additive, if you are allowed to use it at the track you race. For example, I race at a track where tyre additive is not allowed at all, and I also race at tracks where different brands of tyre additive are used. I would say this STX is the most popular one out there for I'd say, again, 90% of racers. There is another brand called Spider Blue. It's a bit more expensive, which is probably why I don't use it. But I would say this, again, is relatively an essential part of racing if you're racing at a track that allows you to have additive. Still at the front end of the car are these. Now these are ride height shims, and they also increase your caster angle. I'm not going to discuss caster angle, I'm just going to talk about the fact that these help you achieve a better ride height with your car. So most tracks will have a minimum ride height allowed of about 3 mil. Some tracks are bumpier than others, and you'll need a ride height of about 3.5, maybe even 4 mil, depending on where you are with the track. And it's good to have a few size options of these, so that you can change the ride height of your car. You will also find as you're running your car around that foam just naturally comes off the tyre, and your tyres reduce in size over a period of time. Now this doesn't happen overnight. You'd certainly get away with 2 or 3 weeks with your car being set up in a certain way. But after those 2 or 3 weeks, if you check your ride height of your car, you will find that it has gone down. So you may need to lift the ride height using these shims. These particular ones are made by DDR Racing. I know Mardave do their own shims. I don't know if Kamtec do. But for the cost of a pack of these, I think you're looking £4, £5 for a pack, maybe a bit cheaper. Definitely worth having for having some options of these for your car. So again, I would recommend an essential part of your car setup. So to go with your batteries, you also need a battery charger. Sky RC produce a very popular one. I think this comes with most of the kits, to be honest. This is what I started with. It's it's still working, there's nothing wrong with it. I've just moved on to one where I can charge 2 or 3 batteries at the same time, because I have a tendency of being silly and trying to run 2 cars on the same night. But if I wasn't trying to do that, I'd probably still have this, and it's perfectly adequate, perfectly fine, and you'll find most people still are using this, and yeah, it's great. So you need a battery charger. So next, with stuff that we will need on a race night, are some tools. Now, I recommend, I'll put a link. I don't know if it will show up because I don't have enough subscribers yet, so you can't purchase it via the link, but at least you can go and have a look of the toolkit that I purchased from Amazon, of which this is a small selection of the tools that came within the kit. You need some tools to be able to work in your car, just to take wheels off, to tighten things, to make sure everything's running smoothly on the night. But there are a selection of tools, for example these ones here, that you don't use very often and you don't need. So to identify them, either in the bag or the box or whatever you do, I tend to wrap them with a bit of tape, just so that I can identify the most frequently used ones faster, so that I'm not rummaging around the box. Just a quick tip really there. But a selection of tools is definitely something you're going to need to go racing. Some extra bits that I think would really help, but are not necessarily essential. So most people at the club, certainly experienced racers, if you're just turning up for your first night, people will not mind helping. So ask. People will help. People are always willing to help. Certainly it's one of the things that I've found most appealing about the hobby, is how approachable everybody is, because everybody loves racing the cars. And although everybody wants to win, honestly, if you speak to most racers, what they actually want is just a good race. So the better setup they can help you get your car, the better of a racer you're going to be, and the closer the racing is going to be with everybody. Honestly, if you speak to most drivers, what they crave more than anything is just a good battle on track. Anyway, I digress. So a ride height gauge, hence a ride height gauge. You slide this underneath your car to find out the ride height of your car. I think these are an essential. However, most people will lend you one, or just let you have a look, and they will certainly help. And if you ask somebody at your club or wherever you're attending, please can I borrow a ride height gauge, or could you help me tell me what the ride height is of my car? Most people will help. I've never come across somebody that isn't willing to help. A little bit of super glue. I know it sounds daft. This isn't for putting the car back together. This is for putting a bead of super glue around the outside edge of your tyres. We'll discuss more of that later, but that is to aid and combat grip roll. If you're new, this is essential. And finally, some double-sided sticky tape. And this helps to fasten down your transponder. Again, if you're new to the club, just ask one of the racers. They'll have a little piece floating around that you can lend. Now this is pretty much what I would say is essentials to go racing for your first 2 months, to at least have some enjoyment in the sport. And you've got a couple of little bits and bobs you can tweak on the car and change. However, you do then get into the world of spurs, and how many parts do you need to take with you on a regular basis. Now, you will see racers attend events with stacks of boxes of stuff, which is brilliant, but it's also sometimes overkill. We don't necessarily need everything we bring with us, but as things that are nice to have. So these are my boxes of bits and spurs. So I've got some pinions, I've got some power caps, some front arms, some A-arms, all sorts of little bits and bobs that I've collected over my racing time. Now this is a box that is, again, this is a purchase from DDR Racing. In fairness though, I think it came in this box and I've transferred it to this one. And it was a selection of C-clips and grub screws and hex nuts and little washers and loads of little bits and bobs that you will find not necessarily fall off your car, but as you're maintaining your car, the buggers will run away from the desk. So it's nice to be able to have some spares, so you're not on your hands and knees trying to find everything all the time. Yeah, I've got to admit, these little boxes of parts are definitely your go-tos of what you need. This is a collection of some springs that I've got, and also some bearings. But again, not necessarily, I'd say, essential. Once you've got your car, the basic setup that comes in kit form, these are all tweaks and the purchases that, as you get more into it, you want to try to change the setup to make things handle a bit differently. So these aren't essential, but they're nice to have. But nothing that you need for your first night's racing. Now these, on the other hand, are kingpins. Now you will bend these, so I would recommend having 2 or 3. I've got a little pack of 4 here of spurs. You will bend these. As a new driver, I think on one particular night things were very bad, and I think I went through 4. But these, as your driving improves, as you do less crashing, you won't bend and break these quite as often. But yes, from a parts or essential bits and bobs guide that you need, yeah, them are definitely worth a few quid to purchase, so you've got some spares. So again, what we're trying to do is not necessarily make you uber competitive here. We just don't want you going home early. Have some spares with you that things will break on the car that you can then replace, and you're back out racing, or at least running around, so that you're not packing up and going home. So another thing that you may come across that you need is a soldering iron. Now, I can't quite put my hands on where mine is at the minute, because you will need to be able to solder the ESC, which is your ESC, to whichever motor you want to run. Now, it's a good idea that you sort that out before you go to the track. However, again, people are so friendly that I guarantee if you're brand new and you just don't have a soldering iron yet, turn up on your club night, ask somebody for help. I guarantee somebody will have a soldering iron with them. And 9 times out of 10, I've never come across a case where somebody won't lend you a soldering iron, or at least if you say, look, I'm really new, please could you help me with this? I've no idea how to solder. Somebody will take 5 minutes and help you solder your motor onto your ESC. As I say, it's one of the things that I absolutely adore about this hobby, is how approachable and friendly everybody is. Yeah, and that, to be perfectly frank, that's not just Mardave and Kamtec and mini racing and the hot hatches that we race. It's across all the different genres, the buggies, the 1/10, IC stuff. It's just, everybody is very, very approachable. Now, don't get me wrong, there's some people that take it way too seriously, but you get that in every sport, don't you? Even my dog's agreeing with me. Hopefully what I've gone over there is a relatively basic, simple setup that's affordable for everybody, that you can go and get yourself sorted with some bits, some spares, some tools, and get up and racing. And as your passion and love for the hobby builds, so will your collection of bits and knowledge of how to use it, because there's no point me talking about different things if I'm not talking about exactly how to use those different bits to make your car better. I've said many times now through this video, whichever club is your local club that you're attending, talk to people. Everybody will help. I don't think there's any racer I've ever come across that won't offer some advice. Or the number of times that when I was first starting, my car was broken and being pulled off the track, and as I came off the podium from driving it into a wall usually, by the time I've got back to the bench, my car's been in bits by other people who've been friendly and helpful enough to start fixing it for me. So I've been super lucky. But my experience is I'm not an isolated case. Loads of people I talk to always say everybody's dead approachable and friendly, and especially if you're new, just don't be shy, ask for help. People will help, I promise. Now, I'm sure there's bits I've missed, but thank you so much for watching. If there is bits that I've missed, please put it in the description in the comments below, because people use these videos as source of information. So if there are other bits that people have thought of, people can read through the comments and go, oh yeah, that one's a good idea, and oh yeah, that's a good idea. So please put some comments in the description below. Oh, yes, almost forgot. A high vis for marshalling. When you go out marshalling, pop your high vis on. Take it off again when you're walking, when you're not marshalling. Then we can see who is supposed to be marshalling and who isn't supposed to be marshalling. So get yourself a high vis. And also, most clubs will insist on what's called a pit towel. One pit towel. Now, it doesn't have to be a purpose-made one like this. I won this. It can just be a towel or any sort of covering so that the table that you're working on, because sometimes you won't bring your own table, there'll be generic tables that are there at the venue. Just keep them covered. It's just respectful of the place. If anybody comes up with any other suggestions, please put them in the comments below. Thank you so much for taking the time to watch. Toodle pip y'all.